My name is Jenna Ross. Today, I'm a 25-year-old wife, a mother to a sweet little boy named Caleb, and a co-founder of a digital marketing agency that's finally taken off. But once, what feels like a lifetime ago, I was an 18-year-old girl standing in the middle of my high school graduation, thinking my life was just beginning, only to watch it crumble before the sun even set. I still remember the exact moment it happened. I was in the school courtyard, my cap crooked from hugging half my class, cheeks aching from smiling so hard. I was floating. And then I saw her, Vivian. My stepmother. She waved me over, that flawless red lipstick smile stretching across her face like it had been painted on too tight. Vivian always wore expensive perfume that made my nose itch and high heels that announced her arrival before she ever spoke. I hated how perfect she looked all the time. Like she wanted the world to believe she belonged on the cover of a magazine instead of in our modest suburban house. "Jenna," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Can we have a moment?" Of course, I followed her. I still believed in family back then. We stepped behind the bleachers. That fake smile didn't fade. Instead, she tilted her head and dropped the bomb like it was no big deal. "I just wanted to let you know, the college fund your dad set up for you, it's no longer available. We've decided to use it for something more practical." I stared at her. The noise of the celebration faded. I couldn't hear the cheers or the music anymore. Just the rush of blood in my ears. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to steady my breath. "Dad told me about that fund. He said he set it aside just for me." Vivian's eyes didn't even flicker. "And he did. But after everything, well, Leo and I discussed it, and we feel it's best if it goes toward his startup. You're a creative spirit, Jenna. College just isn't your path." Leo. My younger half-brother. The one who could do no wrong. He was already there, leaning against the fence like he had nothing better to do. "It's not personal," he added, arms crossed. "I'm just the better investment." Those words broke something in me. I'd always known Vivian favored Leo. She never hid it. But to take my future and hand it to him like I was irrelevant? "That money was for me," I whispered, fists clenched. "You can't just take it. That's theft." Vivian rolled her eyes and glanced around, annoyed I was making a scene. "Keep your voice down, Jenna. This is family business. You're being dramatic." Dramatic. That was her favorite word for me. I didn't fight back. Not then. I just walked away. I barely remember the rest of graduation. All I recall is being in my room that night, still in my gown, staring at the ceiling. My dad had died the year before, cancer, quick and cruel, and without him, there was no one to stop her. Vivian had power of attorney. The fund was in her name. And Leo? He was the golden boy. No one ever questioned Leo. The next day, I begged her to reconsider. I actually begged. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're 18 now. It's time you figure things out for yourself." That night, I cried in Mark's arms. He was my boyfriend back then. He wanted to call a lawyer, but I told him no. What could we do? There was no will we could afford to contest. No proof my father hadn't meant it as a shared family resource. So I made myself a promise. One day, I'd come back. Not begging, not broken, but better. Unshakable. Unignorable. I worked 2 jobs and enrolled in community college. I took night classes, cleaned motel rooms in the morning, and stocked shelves at a pharmacy in between. I ate ramen, skipped sleep, and cried more times than I could count. Leo, meanwhile, threw parties in rented lofts and posted about his business ventures, while spending what should have been my tuition on custom suits and vacation photos in Bali. Vivian beamed every time he walked into a room. But I kept going. And Mark? He stayed. He worked weekends so I could study. When I finally transferred to a university after 3 years, We were engaged. Vivian's reaction? A wedding? Don't you think that's a bit much for someone still trying to find their footing? Leo chuckled behind her. Maybe focus on getting a job before planning a honeymoon. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. Because the truth? I was building something. Quietly. Patiently. I was coming back. By the time I stepped onto my university campus, I wasn't the same girl who had walked away from that graduation ceremony in tears. I was tougher. Hungrier. And maybe just a little bit colder. I was used to surviving on 4 hours of sleep, running from one shift to another, and doing homework in the back corner of a 24-hour diner while sipping on refill coffee. But even so, the university hit me like a freight train. The classes were harder. The expectations higher. And I constantly felt like everyone around me had some invisible advantage I didn't. But I was there. And I wasn't going to waste it. Mark and I shared a one-bedroom apartment that barely had enough space for a bed and a table, but it felt like a palace to us. He was working as a mechanic during the day and taking certification classes at night. We were both exhausted all the time, but we found joy in the little victories, passing exams, making rent, cooking dinner together even if it was just boxed mac and cheese. Sometimes I'd get home and find him asleep on the couch, work boots still on, grease on his hands. And every time, my heart would twist. He believed in me more than I believed in myself. That belief was fuel. During that first year, I landed a part-time internship at a small but scrappy marketing agency downtown. It didn't pay much, but it gave me access to knowledge, to mentors, to the world I wanted to be part of. My supervisor, Karen, was one of those women who could walk into a room and own it without raising her voice. She noticed I stayed late. That I asked too many questions. That I soaked up everything like a sponge. She started giving me side projects. Letting me sit in on meetings. "You've got bite," she said once. "Don't let anyone dull it." I didn't tell her about Vivian or Leo or the college fund. I didn't need to. That part of my life was behind me, or so I kept telling myself. But every time I saw Leo post about another investment round, or watched Vivian gush on social media about her son's brilliance, a part of me burned. They had stolen something that should have been mine. They were out there, living large off my father's legacy, while I was scrubbing toilets and building my dreams from dust. Still, I kept going. After graduation, I was offered a full-time position at the agency. Karen promoted me within a year. And when she left to start her own consulting firm, she offered to take me with her, as a partner. I was 24. The same year Mark and I got married. We had a courthouse wedding, just us and 2 witnesses, and then dinner at a tiny Italian place down the street where the waitress cried when she found out we were newlyweds. It was simple. Honest. Ours. I didn't invite Vivian. Or Leo. They didn't even know where we lived. The business took off faster than we expected. Karen had contacts, I had ideas, and we both had something to prove. Within months, we had clients from coast to coast. I worked harder than ever, but this time it didn't feel like survival, it felt like purpose. And then, just a few weeks after my 25th birthday, we landed a deal with a major tech startup. A retainer contract worth 7 figures. My cut? $2 million. It didn't even feel real. Mark and I sat on the floor of our tiny apartment, still in our work clothes, staring at the numbers on the contract. I remember laughing and crying at the same time. Not because of the money, but because after everything, I had done it. Without them. Without their help. Their approval. Their permission. I looked at Mark and said, "I'm going home." The drive back to my hometown felt surreal. It had been over 6 years since I'd last stepped foot on that street, since I'd seen the house where I'd grown up, now belonging entirely to someone else's version of family. I hadn't even been back for holidays. Not since the day Vivian told me to grow up and move on. But now I wasn't coming back for forgiveness. I was coming back for closure. Mark offered to come with me, but I needed to do this alone. I needed them to see me, not the girl they tossed aside, but the woman they underestimated. The moment I pulled into the cul-de-sac, memories hit me like a tidal wave. Riding bikes with Leo. Dad washing his car on Sunday mornings. The sound of laughter from summer barbecues. So many of those memories were wrapped around my father, and all the rest felt like shadows after he died. Vivian's house looked exactly the same, white siding, perfectly manicured hedges, a porch swing that hadn't moved in years. But the moment I knocked on the door, I knew everything had changed. She opened it wearing pearls and a silk blouse, still perfectly made up like she had just stepped out of a magazine. For a second, her face went blank, like she couldn't quite register who I was. "Jenna," she said, her voice a mixture of confusion and something colder, fear, maybe. "Hi, Vivian," I said with a polite smile. "Mind if I come in?" She hesitated, but then stepped aside. The inside of the house was just as I remembered, sterile, expensive, impersonal. Leo's face was plastered on every surface, graduation photos, press clippings about his startup, even a framed article calling him a young visionary. I almost laughed. She led me into the kitchen. I could feel her eyes scanning me, searching for cracks in the surface. She wanted me to look desperate, tired, worn down. But I wasn't the scared girl from graduation day. "I wasn't expecting you," she said, pouring herself a glass of water but not offering one to me. "I figured," I replied. "I was in town. Thought I'd stop by." "Are you doing okay?" she asked, almost reluctantly. I smiled, slow and steady. "Better than okay. Mark and I are doing really well. We started a business a couple years back. It's doing better than we ever imagined." She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "I came back for something," I continued, setting my bag on the counter. "Not to take. To give." She blinked. "What do you mean?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a certified envelope. "This is a donation. From our agency. $200,000. I want it to go to the Jenna Ross Memorial Scholarship. For young women from this town who were told they weren't enough. I've already spoken with the school district. They're naming it after me." Vivian stared at me, speechless. "I thought you should hear it from me first," I added. "Since it used to be your favorite thing, hearing things before anyone else." She set the glass down, hands trembling slightly. "And Leo?" I asked, my tone colder now. "How's the business?" A flicker of discomfort crossed her face. "He's trying. There've been setbacks. But you know how startups are." I nodded slowly. "I do. Mine just closed a 7-figure contract." Her lips parted like she wanted to say something snide, but no words came out. I stood then, slinging my bag over my shoulder. "Tell Leo the first said hi. Maybe he'll see the scholarship at the school. It'll be hard to miss. My name will be on everything." I turned toward the door. "Jenna," she called after me. Her voice had shifted. Not scolding. Not arrogant. Small. I paused, just for a second. "I hope you're not doing this just to prove a point." I looked over my shoulder, calm and collected. "Oh, I am," I said with a smile. "But that doesn't mean it won't help someone." And I walked out. By the time I got back to my car, my hands were trembling, but not from fear. From release. Years of anger, shame, and hurt had been living in my chest like a heavy stone. Walking out of that house was the first time I truly felt like I had dropped it. Left it on her kitchen floor, gift-wrapped in truth. I didn't expect to hear from Leo. But 3 days later, my phone rang. Blocked number. I answered anyway. "Jenna," he said, his voice scratchy like he hadn't slept in days. "So, you're rich now?" I nearly laughed. "That's what you got from all this?" He sighed. "No. I mean, yes. But also, I didn't know you were doing all that. I thought you left. No, I said. You and Vivian left me. I stayed. I fought. There was silence on the other end. Then, a soft, almost broken, I messed up. I didn't say anything. I burned through most of that fund, he admitted. Tried to make something big. It blew up in my face. Investors pulled out. I had to move back in with Mom. That money was never yours, I replied quietly. I know. We sat in silence for a long time, like two people standing on either side of a collapsed bridge, both unsure how, or if, it could be rebuilt. I'm sorry, he finally said. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I am. I believed him. Not because I trusted him, those days were long gone, but because there was no pride in his voice anymore. Just exhaustion. Do something with your life, Leo, I said. Not because you want to win. But because you want to matter. He whispered, you did. I hung up without saying goodbye. It wasn't cruel, it was closure. That fall, the Jenna Memorial Scholarship launched with 10 recipients. 10 girls, all from tough homes, all full of dreams and grit. I met each of them at the ceremony. One of them, Lacey, reminded me so much of myself it made my heart ache. When she hugged me, she whispered, "This changes everything." I nodded, holding back tears. It's supposed to. Mark and I bought our first house not long after. A modest place with a backyard for Caleb and a kitchen big enough for Mark to cook in without bumping into walls. I framed the check from that tech contract and hung it in my office, not to gloat, but to remember. Not the money. The moment I realized I didn't need their permission to succeed. I made it on my own. And now, I was giving that gift to others. Not to get even. To make it count. A few weeks after the scholarship ceremony, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text, from a number I didn't recognize at first. Vivian, would you be willing to meet for coffee? Just the two of us. I have some things I'd like to say. I stared at the screen for a long time. Every instinct in me screamed, don't do it. But a quieter voice, one that had grown stronger lately, said, maybe it's time to hear her out. So I said yes. We met at a little cafe downtown. Neutral territory. Vivian arrived early, of course, wearing a beige trench coat and dark sunglasses, like she was hiding in plain sight. She stood when I walked in, offering a stiff smile. Jenna, she said, as if she were tasting the word. I sat down across from her. Vivian. There was an awkward pause. She fidgeted with her cup, as if expecting me to fill the silence. But I didn't. I'd given her the floor. Let her use it. I was surprised by your generosity, she finally said, her tone uncertain. The scholarship. It wasn't about you, I replied simply. She nodded slowly. I know. But it did make me think. I waited. I wasn't fair to you, she continued, glancing out the window. You were young. And I treated you like a burden instead of a daughter. After your father died. I didn't know how to be anything but in control. Leo was the easy one. He didn't question me. You did. I raised an eyebrow. So you punished me for having a backbone? She looked down. I suppose I did. I should have felt vindicated. But instead, I just felt tired. Like some old wound was finally being acknowledged, too late to heal the scar it left. I didn't come here for an apology, I said, leaning back in my chair. I came because I wanted you to know, I'm not angry anymore. Her eyes flicked up. You're not? No, I said, honestly. Because what you did pushed me so far down, I had no choice but to rise. And I did. Without you. Despite you. Vivian sat silently for a moment, then said, I always thought you'd come back needing something. Money, support, maybe even forgiveness. But you didn't. I smiled faintly. That's the thing about people like me. We learn how to need ourselves. Her shoulders sagged ever so slightly. Leo's trying, she murmured. He's looking for work. Says he wants to make things right. I hope he does, I said. But I won't be part of that journey. She nodded again, slower this time. Then, for the first time in forever, she looked at me, really looked at me, not as an inconvenience or a threat, but as a person. And maybe that was enough. We didn't hug when we said goodbye. We didn't promise to stay in touch. We just walked our separate ways. And I didn't look back. After that final meeting with Vivian, something inside me shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in slow, subtle ways that I didn't fully recognize until later. I started sleeping better. I stopped replaying old conversations in my head, stopped imagining scenarios where I said the perfect comeback or delivered the truth in just the right way. For the first time since I was 18, my mind felt quiet. But healing isn't always a triumphant crescendo. Sometimes it's in the ordinary things. Folding laundry while Caleb builds towers out of blocks. Laughing with Mark over dinner. Sitting in silence without needing to fill it. Still, one thread tugged at the back of my mind. My dad. He'd been gone for 7 years, but his absence had shaped so much of what followed. His voice, his hopes for me, were what kept me going when everything fell apart. And yet I hadn't visited his grave in nearly 5 years. It had hurt too much. The idea of standing over a stone when I still needed a conversation. But I needed to go. So one crisp autumn morning, I drove to the cemetery just outside town. I brought Caleb with me, though he was too young to understand. He held my hand as we walked up the hill to the spot beneath the old oak tree. The headstone was clean, Vivian must have maintained it, at least. I crouched down and brushed away a few leaves, then sat beside it. "Hi, Dad," I whispered. My voice broke before I could say more. Caleb sat in my lap, holding one of his toy cars. I rested my chin on his little head and closed my eyes. "I did it," I said softly. "Everything you dreamed for me. I did it. They tried to take it, and for a while, I let them. But I fought my way back. And I wish you could see it. I wish you could see him." Caleb looked up at me and smiled. "Mama, is this the grandpa?" I nodded, heart swelling. "Yeah, baby. This is the grandpa who would have loved you so much." We stayed there for a long time. Just sitting. Talking. Crying a little. Laughing, too. I told him everything, about Mark, the business, the scholarship. About how I finally stopped trying to make people love me the way he did. How I learned to stand on my own, and how that strength came from him. As we left, I felt lighter. Not fixed. Not perfect. But free. 6 months later, I stood on the same auditorium stage where I had once tossed my graduation cap into the air, my heart thumping with hope, just hours before my world collapsed. Now, I was back. Not as a student. Not as the quiet girl everyone overlooked. But as the keynote speaker for the senior class award ceremony, invited because of the scholarship I created, the business I built, and the life I had fought tooth and nail to claim. The lights felt blinding as I stepped onto that stage. My heels clicked softly against the wood, the microphone waiting like an old friend. In the front row, a sea of teenagers watched me with curiosity. Somewhere off to the right, I saw Caleb sitting on Mark's lap, swinging his little legs with excitement. Mark gave me a nod, steady and proud. I took a breath. "My name is Jenna Ross," I began, my voice amplified across the room that had once been a kind of sanctuary, and then a battlefield. 7 years ago, I sat exactly where you are now. I was 18, wide-eyed, and utterly convinced that everything was finally going to be okay. I had plans. Dreams. And a father who believed in me so much, he started saving for my college tuition when I was still in elementary school. A murmur moved through the audience. But that night, my graduation night, I learned what betrayal really feels like. I learned that the people closest to you can sometimes be the ones who cut the deepest. I paused, watching their faces shift from polite attention to something more real. My stepmother and half-brother told me the money my father saved wasn't mine anymore. They said I wasn't the practical choice. That I was too much of a dreamer. That college might not be a good fit for someone like me. There was silence now. Even the teachers sat motionless. So I left. No family backing me. No money. Just a duffel bag, a boyfriend who believed in me, and a burning determination to prove them wrong. I looked out into the crowd and found her, the girl with dark curly hair and a threadbare hoodie, sitting bolt upright with her hands clasped tightly together. She looked like she hadn't let herself hope in a long time. I scrubbed motel bathrooms. Waited tables. Took night classes while living on ramen and coffee. But I kept going. Because every time I wanted to give up, I remembered what it felt like to be told I wasn't enough. I took another breath. Now, I co-own a company worth several $1,000,000. I've created a scholarship fund that will send girls from this very school to college, girls who remind me of who I was. Girls who just need one door to stay open. A wave of applause began slowly, then swelled into a standing ovation. I wasn't prepared for that. I stood there frozen for a moment, then smiled, blinking back tears. After the ceremony, the girl from the front row came up to me in the hallway. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her voice was strong. I didn't think someone like me could ever make it, she said. But now, maybe I do. I reached for her hand and gave it a firm squeeze. You can. And when you do, don't let them forget it. That night, back home on our porch, the sun dipped low behind the trees. Caleb ran barefoot through the grass chasing fireflies, his laughter echoing across the yard. Mark handed me a glass of wine and leaned into the railing beside me. You were incredible today, he said. I smiled softly, eyes fixed on our son. I think my dad would have liked the speech. Mark nodded. He'd be proud. Not because of the money. Because you didn't just survive, you created something bigger than their betrayal. I looked up at the sky, stars beginning to scatter across it like confetti. I used to think I had to go back to make them see me, I said. Now I know. I went back to remind myself that they don't define me. I do. Mark kissed the top of my head, and we stood in silence, just watching our boy dance in the twilight. They threw me out because they believed her lies. But I came back with $2 million, a new name on the school's wall, and a life filled with love. And not for revenge. For restoration. For every girl who has ever been told she was too much, or not enough. For myself.